So before I get started, I'd just like to go over what we'll be going over today. So first, we introduction to myself and React, and then we're going to over some of the stuff that you should already know this workshop. And then we're going to dive a little bit into React and some of the components of React. And after that, we'll do a mini project. And then I'll leave about 5 minutes for questions and discussion. So about me, my name is Jeff Denazir. I am currently a software engineer at Fresh Technology. I have been part of UP in the past. I was part of the e-board. Actually, I did most of the web stuff, APIs for ShellHacks last year. So I'm pretty excited to teach this workshop. If you guys want to stalk me around, you can check me out on LinkedIn. I also have my GitHub link on here in my portfolio. So my goal for this workshop is to give everyone a basic understanding of React, how to get started, why should you use it, and some of the core components. And like I said before, we'll do like a mini project at the end with dark mode, emphasis on dark mode. So some of the stuff that I'm assuming that you guys have some experience with, at least some experience with, to be able to understand the stuff from this workshop is HTML and CSS, some JavaScript knowledge, at least know what NPM is. Maybe Node.js is not too crazy, so if you don't know JS, it's fine. So HTML and CSS, HTML is just gonna do a brief definition of these. So if you don't know, so HTML is a markup language, which is basically a way to create documents for a website. And CSS is used to style your HTML, which basically like a language for making the HTML look whatever way you want. And JavaScript is usually used along HTML and CSS to add functionalities. For example, let's say if you had a website and you wanted to send some data from your website to an API, you would use JavaScript for that. And NPM is a package manager for JavaScript. So basically what that means is that you can host reusable modules on NPM, and then you can just download them on your project and reuse them, and anyone can just download them from NPM and use them. And Node.js is a JavaScript runtime. So typically JavaScript only runs on the browser until like Node.js became about. So now you're also able to run JavaScript on your computer, your server, or wherever you have Node.js available. So basically Node.js lets you run JavaScript outside of the browser. Also, if you guys have any questions or I'm talking, feel free to shoot them. I'll take a look. All right, so let's talk about React. So React was created by a software engineer named Jordan at Facebook. From what I've heard, there was like managing states and stuff and like a lot of data on the Facebook website. So that they needed a way, a better way for creating UI. So came up with JavaScript. And Facebook then made it open source in 2013. And then right now they are started at version 1, and now they are currently at version 16.13. So a lot of companies are using React these days. For example, Lyft, I actually have a friend who's just interned there, and he's used that a lot. Uber uses React. Facebook, obviously, they created it. Pinterest is using it. I'm using it at my job. I used it at my previous job. They used it at ShellHacks. Everyone's using React. And I noticed there's some questions, some people asking about using Node.js with React. So because you usually have to build your React app before you ship it. So usually you would need to do that in a JavaScript environment, since React is pretty much JavaScript. So typically you would use that would run on Node.js, and then you can build and ship your React app. So in a way, you do need Node.js or some type of JavaScript run one time. So what is React? React is a library for building user interfaces. So what does that mean? So a lot of the stuff that we typically see for doing user interface, for example, Angular, which is another popular JavaScript framework for building your user interfaces. It usually comes with everything, but those are like frameworks. But JavaScript, React is just a library, which means it's pretty lightweight, and you can just use it as part of your application, as opposed to it being the whole application. So one of the reason why React is so good is that you can write components and reuse them. So for example, I could write a card and then reuse that not just on my website, in other websites. And I could reuse it multiple pages on the website without having to rewrite it. It's maintainable because the codes are kind of written in pieces, and those pieces can be tested and make sure that they're reliable and stuff like that. And React has a really big community. Like if you go to GitHub, you'll see that there's always people and debating stuff and stuff like that, and contributors, a lot of contributors in there. And React kind of make it easy for managing states. So I've actually messed around with jQuery, and it makes it easier to definitely do stuff with JavaScript on the web. But it's definitely way easier with React.js. And it's even worse if you have to just write plain JavaScript. There's a lot of different cases that you have to think about that you don't with JavaScript. And it's harder to manage state with just plain JavaScript. So the way is that, React is component based, which makes it reusable. So I think I mentioned on the previous slide, one of the other key points is that React it's way faster to use React for on the browser with JavaScript, for example, for managing UI on the browser with JavaScript. One of the key reasons is because JavaScript uses this technology that's called virtual DOM. So the way that virtual DOM works is that it basically a virtual copy of the real DOM, but it does not update the real DOM unless it needs to. So for example, let's say you have, so for example, typically when you're using regular JavaScript, if you need to update anything on the site, you do it with JavaScript, but you're actually manipulating the actual DOM. So whatever you do with JavaScript actually happens to the browser. And that can take it can slow down the website if you're doing a lot of stuff. But JavaScript uses this technology that's called, React uses this technology that's called virtual DOM. So basically what they do is that if you change something, they don't actually do it on the real DOM. So they just do it on the virtual DOM until they think it's safe or to do it on the real DOM. So using that, they can patch a lot of stuff together. For example, if you do a lot of changes, they can do one update to the real DOM as opposed to a lot of mini updates, which will slow down your website. So the way you write component with JavaScript with React is using JSX, which is basically XML-like syntax for writing reusable components. Using JSX, you can write components and then reuse them across your site. So JSX stands for JavaScript XML. JSX basically it allows you to write HTML in your JavaScript, which is typically you don't do that. All right, so now we're gonna dive into our mini project. So let me exit. Let's go to Code Sandbox. I need to type Code Sandbox. So Code Sandbox is basically an environment you can mess around with JavaScript stuff. It's basically like everything on there pretty much works like your local environment. So we're gonna go in there and just use a React template to demonstrate some of the stuff. All right, so typically when you're bootstrapping a React project, you will use this tool that's called Create React App. It's basically a command line script that you can use to bootstrap your project. But since we're using this, we can just grab a template from here. All right, so this is our React project. So basically we have package.json, which indicates that we're using the JS because, for building the React app. So this basically have some information about the app, the name, the version, some description. You can ignore all of these. And some of the dependencies we have for our project. You can ignore this and some of the scripts that we can run. And then the public folder is the one that actually gets served. So if we go here, it's just plain HTML. And then, this is just like normal HTML stuff. And if you go down here, you see this div is where all of our React JavaScript get added to. So if we go to source, which is where our React app is, it's just a stuff file. So if you go here, you'll see that we're importing React because we are using React in this page. We always have to make sure React in the context. So basically what they're doing here, this is just normal JavaScript stuff. They're just getting the div I mentioned earlier, which is this one. And then they're adding the JavaScript, our React app to it, which is basically compiles to JavaScript. Yeah. So man, some people can't see what's going on. It's too much. All right, cool. So here we are importing React DOM, which is what actually renders our app. And then this is a component that we are importing here. So if you look here, you'll see that they are using JSX, which looks a lot like HTML and CSS, but they are using it with JavaScript, which pretty much makes it JSX. So typically you can do add a .jsx extension to your JSX file, so you can also use .js. Both work. Yeah. All right. So what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to implement as much as we can from the Medium homepage. Let's go to the article page. All right, sorry, let me sign in real quick. I can't see the view. We're gonna try to implement as much as possible from this page. So the reason I wanted to implement something like this is because there's a lot of reusable stuff going on. If you look you'll see that all of these looks the same. So there could all be one component that we use. All of these look the same. All of these look the same. So this could literally be one component, and we'll just reuse it with like a list of data. Let me share this. So I've shared the link to the code sandbox on the chat for the people who cannot see my screen properly. All right, cool. So to get started, let me go back here. All right, so we're going to create a folder called components, which is where we're going to have all of our reusable components. And we're not going to have any pages. All of our stuff are going to be rendered within this. So we're not going to have any pages. So let me see, how does this look? Let's start by creating this card component, which basically has a subheader, a header, some descriptions, and some information about the publisher and a picture. All right, cool. So in components, we are going to create a component called card. We'll use that JSX to make it more clear that we are using JSX. And then in here, we are going to import React because we always need to have React in the context whenever we're using JSX. That is being imported from React. Then our component is just going to be a function. Let's call it card. So let's make sure we export this. Cool. So for a card function component, you have to make sure you're returning some JSX. So let's go with this. Let's see. So we need to have a div. We use that as our container. So if we look here, we have a container which holds everything. And then we have two sections. We have two and two. Okay, cool. So this is going to be our container. Since this is JSX, we have to use class name for class. Let's call this card container. And then inside of here, we have two sections. So we have two sections. One is this left picture here, and the other is this. Cool. Let's call this. And then let's call this one content container. Close enough. Let's call this content. All right, cool. So if we look back, and then here we have a subtitle, a title, some description, some information about the author. So if we go back here, we need the subtitle. Let's make that H2. Put that on H3. And then let's make the title on H1. Then we have a description, which is just a paragraph. And then we have some information about the author. So let's make that a div because there's a lot of content inside of there. Information. All right, cool. So let's do some styling. Let me add some class names here. Take this subtitle. Info. And let's make this title. Description. Very cool. So now that we have all of this, all right, so let's go back here to our root component and try to import this and see if we see anything. So let's import card from component / card. And then let's try to display it. Let's give this actually, let's just try to add this here. Cool. So you can see that's actually rendering our card, even though it doesn't look pretty yet. Cool. All right, so now let's go back to the card and try to add some styles. Let's import styles. We're just going to use the root file for styling just to make it easier. It's from styles TSS. Actually, we don't need to, since we are using CSS modules, we can just import the file and the styles will be available in this context. All right, cool. So now let's add some styles for our card. If we start with this, if we go here, give it a weight. Let's make it 300 px. Give it a background just to see if stuff are working. Let's make this gray for now. Cool. So it is here. Let's see. So we have two sections here. We also have the picture. We have this, and we have this, the content class. So let's add a class for that one too. Okay, so let me give this a weight just so this can have the picture, so the picture can have some space. Let's make it 50 px. Let's give it a background so we can see if anything's happening. Did I mess up something? I did. What did I do? All right, so I have return here. All of this should be coming. All right, cool. All right, so here, and then for content, let's give that a background too. Let's remove this background so we can see the background of the content. And cool. So now you can see where a picture is supposed to go and where all the content stuff is supposed to go. Let's increase this width a little bit more. All right, so let's go to Unplash and find a template page here. This looks perfect. Actually, not. We can just copy the address for this and make sure it works. All right, cool. So we can use this. Let's do this. We add the picture as a background image for this. Let's see. Right, so we need to pass in the URL here. Let me add some images here to make sure the image shows up. I forgot some icon here. So background position, 100%. Let me open the dev tool here to see what's going on. So this is showing up properly. Let's see. Let's see if the styles are being applied. Our card here, content page here. What's going on? It's 100. Let's change this. Background size. What's happening? Something weird. Let's see. So this is good. This is showing properly. So this has a width. Let's try giving it a fixed height. So that works. Cool. I think we set a height for the card there, so we can probably use that. First, we're just gonna copy that and paste it here instead. For some reason, the percentage is not working, and I don't want to debug it right now. Can add background height here. Okay, so we can close this. All right, cool. Let's give these, you know what, we don't want to do this here. Let's give them a fixed weight. Let's make this 65%. Let's make this cool. All right, good enough. All right, cool. So now we need to start subtitle, title, and description. So if we go back here, cool. So if we go back here, we can just select our subtitle from the content. That's great. And then font size, let's say 18. Yes. All right, so now let's so similar things for the title. Let's change this to 1. Let me change the back. Let me remove the background for this. All right, so if you look at here, this is a slightly lighter color. Black, and the other ones are light. So let's keep this one normal color. And for the description, which is just a paragraph, that one's also gray. I believe I named this Arthur info. So in here, split display flex. Very cool. And here we're gonna have different stuff. Let me see. We have 2 groups in here, so let's add a few more divs. And then we have some user actions in the other side, like here. It's cool. So if we save this, let's see what that looks like. So we can start it. Very cool. Let's rename this. Let's call this container. And very cool. So now let's add some styles. All right, so someone just asked why are we using class name as opposed to class? And that is because we are using JSX. So in JSX, you can't use class because you use class name instead. I believe that was done because if they use class with JSX, then that would collide with the normal web browser API, which are already using class. So in JSX, you use class name for classes. So now let's update this. So if we go back here, we can style this. This should be container. Let's copy this since it's the same thing. Container. So container display flags. Cool. So if we go back here, so what we want to do is we want to add some space between the two sections. Which is this. So we have these sections in this. Let me copy this class name. Then let's add it here. Very cool. So now we have all of that. Let's add some margin. On the left side of this, let's add 10px. Let's add a background so we can see what's going on the screen actually. Let's make it red. And add a background for the info so we can see the phone. Let's make this one blue. Very cool. So if you want both of these to be the full width and all the way at the bottom. So as you can see, if you look here, let's see this container here. We want, if we go back here, so we want this to be display flex. And then we want this to take a weight. So let me use 100%. So to get into a corner. But let's make this one light gray. All right, so we can just take in the whole width. But next, this will be all the way at the bottom. It's a lot of CSS. You guys are learning more CSS than React right now. Okay, cool. So I have our container content, and we want our content to take the whole height. Let's make this height 100. And the other thing is some weird stuff going on. Let me take a look. All right, so if we look here, let's see why this is overflowing. All right, so this H3 have some ridiculous stylings. I think I applied the styles to the wrong element. Let's see. Yeah, I did. This was supposed to be content. All right, so let's see what this looks like. This looks good. Looking good. All right, so now so this is our the info. Let me see where that is. This is, so we want this whole thing to be aligned always at the bottom. So we can do an align self. I believe this one. I believe this is in a flex container, so we should be able to do. This should be flex and let's see what's going on. Let's see what's going on in the browser. So if you look in here, we have our contained. This is not display flex. So here. And then this is a content. Where's this extra space coming from? Direction. This is let's see. Let's just do this. So if you go here, we can just do this. All right, cool. Stop focusing on making this pretty. All right, so back to content. Content is here. We're going to fix this. Cool. All right, so now let's copy some text so this looks better. Let's start by copying the descriptions in here. Let's do this. Let's just go lorem ipsum. Right, so just a text generator. So we're just gonna copy some dummy text and paste them in there. Let's copy this for our description. Description, where are you? So we paste this here for the subtitle. Let's copy this for a title. Let's copy this for a subtitle. So let's add the actual informations. And then here, cool. All right, so there's some issue with this not taking hot space. Let me see. All right, cool. So our paragraph definitely has a way too high font size. We got 11. H1's fine. Let's make this 14. Close this. And then these all have some margin. Let's reset that. Let's hit that here. And also here. Cool. This looks better. It's even better. Smaller. Paragraph 18. All right, so yeah, so we're not going to because we spend so much time styling it. So now we're just gonna focus on like using some stuff like state to pretty much display this component multiple times. Let's remove all the back. Let's leave some here. It's good enough. All right. So in React, you have this concept of props. Props are pretty much attributes, like properties that you can pass to a component. So that, for example, all of the values here, this text here, I could pass it as a prop to this component. So if I'm using this component in a context, like in a different context, so this text doesn't have to say this, it can say something else. For example, this component here, I mean, this here and this here, if they were a component, those will probably be like just prompts that you pass to them. So it says something else as opposed to whatever it says here. So we're just going to use that to pass the data here. So the props is just for a functional component, it's just the parameters that are passed. Always an object in React. You can name it whatever you want. The convention is to name it props. And then from there, you can pass property to your component. I'll extract some values from here, which we'll pass later. So the first thing you want to extract is a subtitle. So subtitle. Actually, from here, let's go to the title, the description. So we can get from here to this. What else can we get from there? There's 3 buttons, but we're not going to implement that. So let's could also get this. Let's just make text. Very cool. And some like blue props. If you're not familiar with this, this is just object this construction. Which is like a new feature of JavaScript. So I'm basically declaring these as constant values from this prop. So this would be the same thing as equals to props that subtitle. This is equivalent to this. All right, cool. So we can ignore that now. All right, so let's grab all of these values and description is expected here. An object, let's call it props. So object here, description. Here I'm going to pass them in line so everyone can see what's going on. So let's pass description here. Let's go to this text. Go back here. Let's extract the subtitle. And let's go back here and pass the subtitle. In the title. Let's grab the title here. Pass that here as a prop. Here. Let's pass this here. This is a string. Okay, cool. So we can go back and also pass actions is equal to this. Very cool. So if you look here, you see that the components still look the same, even though we move all the data from our component and we are just passing it here. So the good thing about this is you can reuse this component as many times as you want. So if you wanted to display multiple cards, you could just, let's say we had an array, let's call this data, of some abstract data from a server, which returns an array of articles. And they'll have descriptions, title, subtitle, also say actions. And then so let's say we have this. Let's see, I'm mixing something somewhere. Okay, so this should be an cool. Here. Okay, so if we had multiple of these, let's say we had of these, right? You have this array of data, some abstract data from our backend. We could literally do something like this. Just look through the array. And then for each of these, we get some item. And then we just return the card with the props from with the data from our backend. If you look here, you'll see that, let me close this. You'll see that now we have multiple cards. Let me add some margin below this so you can see better. Right, so you can see that we are displaying, now instead of having one card, we have the same card, but multiple times, and we don't have to write it for each of those times. So we are pretty much just displaying a bunch of data, but using the same component. And if the data here were different, it would just show different stuff. I know I promised we were gonna do dark mode. Seems like we are out of time. Yeah, I wanted to do, let's see, we have about 4 minutes. So React has this other concept called states, which is basically some value that you can have that's attached to a component, and that value can be, has a life cycle where you can switch the value and it will automatically change the data on the component. So for example, let's have some abstract, some data here, and then set state. Just to React at state. And then let's just set this to say, all right, cool. So basically this, we are defining this in the React host. So the way is that this returns React.useState returns an array, which the first value being your state and the second one your state. To use state, you can pass an initial value of your state. So if we want, we could display this, display the data here. Let's do this. Make sure it's here. And add a P. then we'll just do our state here. So you'll see this is 0, but let's add so we can change this. All right, so you have a button, let's say, so button has an unchanged function that we can use to capture the event. X. Right, so in here we can just do set state is equal to state. Buttons all the way at the end. So let's put our button here. Right, so if we click this, this should be changing. I believe this is on click, actually not on change. Here, as we click, the count is changing because we are calling our set state here, and we are adding to our initial state, which was 0. So as we are clicking, the count is updating. Cool. This is pretty much all about all we are doing today. If you guys have any questions, I'll take them right now. I know we didn't get to go through everything, so I'll be more happy to answer any questions. Yeah, definitely. You can use pretty much, any like HTML and CSS stuff. Bootstrap is mostly CSS, so you can just import it, just like I'm importing this style file here, and use it. Cool. Any more questions? Anyone had any questions related to state, props, JSX, components and stuff? All right, cool. If you guys don't have any more questions, yeah, just feel free to shoot me a text on GitHub. I mean, on Discord if you have any questions. I'm gonna leave my username in the chat.